started. Thank you all for joining us. Today, we're joined by Dr. Elizabeth Nelson, Jennifer Vanel, a licensed professional clinical counselor, and Jackie Mishu, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And they're all from the Colorado Center for Clinical Excellence, which is a feedback-informed treatment center in Denver, Colorado. So Elizabeth, Jennifer, Jackie, take it away.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us. Oh, there's Jen. Says she's Megan 4G right now, but so thank you all for inviting us to talk with you. We are all psychotherapists at the Colorado Center for Clinical Excellence in Denver, and working in a feedback-informed treatment model means just basically that we explicitly include feedback from our clients as we go along about whether they're getting what they need and whether the relationship's going well. Because we know if it's not, people aren't going to get what they need and they're going to leave therapy. So that's what that's about. The three of us, Jackie and Jen and I, have been running online support groups for a while now to help people deal with the effects of the pandemic on so many aspects of their lives. Oh, and I should have you guys introduce yourselves. Sorry, I got a little discombobulated. So I'm Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Michaud, a marriage and family therapist here at the practice. Thank you so much for having us.
You're muted.
Good. Hello. Sorry about that. I'm having some tech issues this morning. I'm Jennifer. I'm not Megan. Actually, that's Megan over there. And I'm changing my name so you can see that on the screen. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having us. We're looking forward to sharing with you today.
Okay. So, and actually a little later, Jen's going to tell you about the new group that we're starting soon, an online support group for people in the church community, such as yourselves. What I'll just say now is that during the support group each week, we teach an easy and useful skill for dealing with stress. So in that spirit, today we're going to lead you through a couple of really simple stress reducing skills and explain a few others so that you can leave today knowing a little bit more how to take better care of yourself. So with that, I will pass it over to Jen.
All right, so I'm going to ask each of you to just pick an item that's sitting in front of you, something small you can hold in your hands. You don't have to show it to everybody, but just pick up whatever item is there and convenient for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to think to yourself about describing the item that you have in your hands. So first thing is, how does that item feel in your hands? Is it heavy? Is it light? Somewhere in between. Think about what color that item is. Is there print on it? Is there writing on it? Are there pictures, scribbles, something like that? Something different? How does it feel? Is it smooth? Is it fuzzy? Is it rough? Sticky? Is it cold? Room temperature, hot? Is there a temperature to it? And just think for a couple of seconds about how, how much you can describe the item. Describe it as much as you can and as much detail as you can in your mind. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to kind of think through your own questions, your own things about that item. If you have something that's liquid, you can drink the item, see what it tastes like. Okay, so let's pause there. Would anyone be willing to volunteer to talk with me about their item? Any takers? All right, Kate. Kate's going to be our brave volunteer. So Kate, what was your item, if you're willing to share that?
It is a paperweight that I have. It is one of the very few pictures that I have of my mother, my brothers, and me when my brothers and I were small. My brother, I think, probably made it. I look like I'm about 4 years old and I've got a picture of a rainbow in my hand.
Okay, all right. So when you were thinking about your item and I was talking through those questions, what were you thinking about?
Well, I was looking at it and I was feeling it. Yes, it's cold, it's hard, it's heavy. But looking at the pictures, because all these people are now gone. So that there was, kind of a warmth and a comfort, which is why I keep it here at work.
Okay.
So that I can look at that when I need to.
Okay. So for you, you were kind of thinking about the memory of those people because that's part of the item, but also the item.
Yes.
How many, just a show of hands, how many of you were really focused on the item that you had? Okay. So the way that so I call this the brain vacation. And one of the reasons that I like to teach this tool is because you can do it in the grocery store. You can do it between a meeting. You can do it in the restroom, wherever you have time. And it only takes a few minutes. I think you guys spent probably 2 or 3 minutes, which is great. But it could be something as simple as, a ballpoint pen that has hardly any description. It's really just giving yourself a minute to allow the brain to really kind of focus in on one thing. I would say for Kate, thank you so much for volunteering. So Kate had a little bit of extra because she had something really personal, the photograph. I would say if you're, Kate, if you're going to do this in the future, if you're feeling more stressed, pick something that doesn't have, that's more, that doesn't have that personal connection. If you find that the picture or something like that is interfering. But you can use literally anything. You could use an envelope on your desk. You could use the stapler. You could use the handle on the cart in the grocery store. So it doesn't matter what item it is. It's just allowing yourself to have that way to kind of ground, to bring your mind back in when it's racing, when it's stressed, when you haven't had a break. We recognize right now everyone is stressed. And I'm sure that in your community, you're experiencing that as well. So this is a great, really short, brief kind of intervention. And you can easily teach something like this to others if you have people that you work with who would benefit from it. It's literally just the brain vacation. I call it grounding with a common object too. So something really simple that hopefully you can take forward and can be a bit of a stress relief for you. So with that in mind, I'm going to actually pass it to Jackie, who's going to do the next section for you.
Hi, everyone. So now that you've had that experience, just taking a moment to kind of clear your mind and focus in on just something in your control right in the present moment, we're going to talk a little bit more today about different techniques that can be used to just manage your stress. So literally, there are hundreds of different stress relieving kinds of techniques, but today we're going to think about stress relieving techniques kind of falling into 5 general categories. So the first category is grounding. The second, relationships, then acceptance, self-compassion, and perspective taking. And so with that, Elizabeth is going to be diving into the first topic of grounding. Can't hear you.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Such a rookie mistake. And the 5 categories are GRASP. So that's why we're calling today getting a grasp on stress. Maybe a way you can remember these 5 things. But let's start with grounding, which actually Jen just mentioned. Really, grounding just refers to getting connected with the present moment, like you did in the brain vacation just now. I think you noticed, for instance, that that practice really helps connect you with the present moment by helping you focus your attention. That's a feature of grounding techniques. And as you're describing your object, in this case, you tuned into each of the 5 senses. So tuning into your senses, as simple as that sounds, is really a strategy for grounding and grounding easily. It only takes a few minutes or maybe even a few seconds, right? But in those minutes, everything you're worried about can just fall away, placing you completely in the present moment. Other effective techniques for grounding often are body focused. So for instance, it can be really calming to simply place your hand on your chest and feel the rise and the fall. You can try that for a moment, just the quiet that that can bring. And there are many different ways of focusing on your body by focusing on your breath, even just the simple focusing on what the experiences of the sensations of inhaling and exhaling, inhaling and exhaling. That practice can bring you into the moment quite effectively, and it's very simple. The next category of techniques to get a grasp on stress is relationships, that's the R. And you know, we're such social beings. It makes sense that we tend to feel better when we reach out to others. But right now, for instance, like depending on how your church is doing things during the pandemic, lots of churches are doing virtual services or really reduced attendance. So you might notice that you're really missing out with like the conversations you had at coffee hour, right? Or just sharing the pew with someone, a sense of relationship, which is, we're all trying to do on video, but it's different than in person. So here's what we want you to remember. It's that when you're stressed, relationships matter. Don't isolate yourself. Don't think you have to figure it out all alone. You can reach out to a friend, join a support group, call your pastor, call a hotline if you need to. Anything that brings in a sense of relationship for you is really important and not to be skipped, not to be overlooked. And if you're doing okay, remember that someone else might be really grateful if you reach out to them. I know in your community, you guys are probably really good at that. But reaching out to relationships is a tried and true stress reducer. And of course, a very significant relationship you can reach out to is your relationship with God, whether that's in your own private, quiet moments of reflection, or if you're singing out with the whole congregation in person or in Zoom. However you do it, connecting on this plane or with the divine, like cultivating those relationships and connecting is really important. Now in GRASP, the A is for acceptance. When you're really stressed about something, it can be very helpful to step back for a moment and take a deep breath and just try to accept things as they are. Sometimes we forget, these things sound simple, but we forget that we can do them. It doesn't mean that you don't work to make things better, right? But it's a mental shift that can help you give up the fight, like sort of fighting with what is, and just move into that's often so part of what's stressful. So for instance, if you've made a mistake, instead of beating yourself up about it, you could do your best to accept that you're human, accept that the mistake happened, and that can clear a way for moving forward. Or taking the pandemic as an example, in all the ways it's affecting your life, there are aspects that are simply out of your control. So rather than railing against them, trying deeply and perhaps humbly to actually accept that the things that are out of your control can clear the way for figuring out what perhaps can be done that's within your control, right? So it's giving up the fight and actually accepting what is in order to actually find a way forward through such a difficult time. Of course, it's worth saying in the context of faith, acceptance might take the form of that mental shift to just give it over to God. I think, who was it? Kimberly? You were saying something about that, about the blue Christmas services. Now, of course, acceptance doesn't happen in just one step, right? But by practicing conscious acceptance, in whatever way it makes sense to you, that's a very powerful technique. So that's, you know, day in and day out, little ways, practicing accepting this thing as it is, and accepting this thing as it is, and accepting this thing as it is. cultivates a state of mind that can really help you move through stressful times. So that's grounding, relationships, and acceptance. And for the S and the P, I'm going to pass it back to Jackie.
So the S stands for self-compassion. So I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I definitely notice that when I'm under stress, or sometimes when people close to me are under stress, it's really hard to practice self-compassion. I feel like we all kind of have a tendency when we feel stressed to really kind of grind into that stress and like magnify the way that we feel about the problem, or maybe even like the way that we're potentially failing to the degree that we hold ourselves to some sort of expectation. So with, practicing self-compassion, the first piece that I want to point out today is just awareness of our self-talk. So our internal dialogue, I know for some of us, we feel that self-talk inside of our head very present throughout the day. Others, it's just kind of here and there. But it reflects our relationship with ourselves. And, when we allow that self-talk to shift in a really negative direction, it can really magnify the stress that we're under. And so part of shifting that self-talk is just focusing on practicing kind of internal empathy. So I know right now empathy is a big part of what we're pushing for, kind of in the culture, finding ways to be kinder and more compassionate towards others and towards ourselves. And so one of the ways that I like to think about practicing self-empathy is about being kind of your own internal best friend. I know sometimes when we give people advice, we'd say, well, what would your best friend say to you about how to deal with that problem or with what you're going through? Because I think we tend to just be so much harder on ourselves, be our own worst critic. And so that first skill is just kind of turning inward and saying, okay, here's what I'm going through. What might my best friend say to me about how I'm feeling this right now? And really kind of letting that feeling and that empathy sort of sit with you with whatever struggle you're kind of going through. The next piece of just sort of practicing self-compassion is just accepting that the struggle that you're going through is okay, that we're all human, that we all go through periods of ups and downs, and that maybe it's okay to be in a spot where things are hard. I know, being kind of somebody who people look to for support, which all of you also are, being leaders in your church communities. Sometimes I feel like leaders hold themselves to higher standards, that they have to be more okay than everybody else to be a good support person. And so this is just about allowing yourself to be human too, and accept that the struggle that you're going through is valid as well. So the last piece of self-compassion is just making space for maybe some temporary new boundaries. So when we're under stress, sometimes it feels like we've just got more going on and we might need to make space to sometimes do less. Maybe a new boundary might be, the time that you end your work day. It might mean allowing more time to rest because of the stress that you're kind of experiencing. And it might even mean kind of setting boundaries with yourself about being productive and how much work you accomplish. So just finding ways to kind of take care of yourself and to practice that self-care. So that's kind of the different pieces with self-compassion that we're thinking through. So the next letter in GRASP is P, which stands for perspective taking. And so for this, one of the ways I like to think about perspective is kind of like an abstract painting. So what I want you to do, if you feel comfortable with it, is go ahead and take a moment to close your eyes. And in your mind, I want you to focus or kind of visualize an abstract painting that you're familiar with. Maybe this painting is a Monet, something really familiar, or a Van Gogh. And kind of just see if you can visualize that abstract painting in your mind. Now in your mind, I want you to kind of put yourself nose to nose or nose to painting with the picture, with the image. And I want you to see in your mind what that abstract painting kind of looks like when you're standing right up against it. Maybe you notice that it's just sort of like a blur of color, or things don't quite come into focus. Now I want you in your mind to take a big step backwards so that you're about a foot from the painting. Pay attention to how it shifts. And then I want you to take another big step. So you're about 2.5 feet from the painting, kind of standing arm's length away from the painting now. How does it look? So when you feel ready, sort of opening your eyes. And if anybody feels comfortable with sharing, how did the painting shift when you were real close versus a little bit further away? Anybody willing to share? Sure, Annie.
That was a great analogy because I've done it at where we can get somewhat close to paintings in museums, and it went from just splotchy and random and like no control or intention, and then the further away I stepped, it got, oh, now I see that it's dots of color, and then as you walked us further back, then I could see the intention was this image.
So it really came into focus. At first, it's like all you could really see was the color, and then you could kind of see more the pattern with the speckling or the dots, and then you could actually see what it was.
Yeah, I knew that's what we were doing, so that it was more the emotion that came up was the first one of it. It was just so chaotic. And then the further I got back, the more I could see what the artist meant or intended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Did anybody else kind of have that same sort of experience? Similar? Yeah. So I feel like that the idea of the abstract painting, it's a good way to kind of illustrate perspective, because the way that we observe our own lives, I think because we're so close to the problems in our own lives, we tend to stand a little bit more nose to nose with the things that we experience. So when we're in them actively experiencing the stress, sometimes we can be so close to the problem that it's hard to get the full picture. It's hard to see what's really going on. And so finding different ways to literally kind of take a step back, or figuratively in your life, taking a step back from the stress, getting support, getting perspective, that can be really helpful. So one of the ways that we can kind of get perspective with the way that we relate to our stress is sort of focusing on this idea of control and point of control. So there's this theory with resilience that kind of talks about, it's this idea of locus of control. So what it means is, where is the control versus you and the problem coming from? So this theory basically says that in the world, control can come from two spaces: from either within the person, within themselves, or from the world itself, from your work, your kids, your environment, the media, right? All the external stuff. And basically, when we're under high periods of stress, it can feel like the world is just sort of coming at you, you know. And right now, I feel like we're all feeling this because it's just constant media overload. Literally, the virus is around us, changing kind of everything that we're experiencing. So that point of control can feel like it's out in the world. And all that we can kind of do is sort of like react to it and wait for the stress to come at us. But we can actually kind of foster that control from within and say, okay, well, yeah, there is this stress kind of going on around us, but what is in my control? How do I respond? So rather than feeling like everything's just kind of coming at us, it's like everything is sort of just around, but we're going to think about how we engage with it, how we allow that control from within. And so even thinking about, okay, if this is what's going on with the media right now and it feels like a lot, what can I do to change how I interact with that, or maybe to set some boundaries? So it's the idea of control within versus control with around. Has anybody at any point during all of this felt like the control was just totally around them, that they were kind of getting squashed by all of it? Yeah, a little bit. Me too. So it's definitely a thing that's happening. And so with that, I feel like one of the helpful things to think is like, well, how do I have control within? And for me, it's about thinking about reaction versus response. So when the control is kind of around us, coming at us, it feels like all we're doing is sort of like bracing against it and just reacting. Like, okay, this thing's going to happen, and all I could do is just reflex, have a reaction to it. Whereas a response is more like, okay, so this thing is going on. I'm going to take even a microsecond just to think about, how do I really want to react to it, and focus on your response. But sometimes that response, just like that perspective, it requires that step back. Maybe to really think through how you're going to respond, you need to talk to a friend or a family member. Maybe you need to take a moment to pray and get some clarity about how you want to react to the problem. Or sometimes you just need to actually get some more clarity around the stressor itself by, naming the emotion that you're feeling in reaction to the stressor, and actually in your mind, kind of breaking it down. So here's the emotion, here's how I want to handle it, here's some ways that I could kind of go about that. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's my idea on perspective. So the next thing that we're going to do is a little intervention that kind of encompasses that idea of control and perspective. So I don't know if you guys have like a piece of paper, a blank sheet of paper kind of around you. It could be the back of something. If you can find a piece of paper, and then if you've got it, kind of let me know. Okay, you got your paper. Great. So what I'm going to have you do with your piece of paper is I want you to draw a big circle on it. Really take up a lot of the space of the paper. So kind of maybe it looks like this. So what this circle represents are all the things within your control. And then outside of the circle is everything else. So what I want you to do is just take a moment to literally write down in your present life right now, what are some of the things that are in your control? So go ahead and take 2 or 3 minutes to do that. Does everybody feel like they have a couple of things in their circle? Fantastic. So if anybody is comfortable with sharing, I'm curious, what are some of the things that maybe people put down as far as what's in their control in their present life right now? And anybody's welcome to just sort of shout those things out.
What I wear.
Yeah. How you present yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
What I watch or listen to.
Yeah. So like media and the news. Yeah. Fantastic. Any other ideas?
Attitude.
Ah, so your outlook. Yeah. So maybe you guys wrote things down like diet or nutrition, exercise, sleep, ways that you could relax, how you're going to unwind, maybe the environment you put yourself in, or even the people you spend your time with, who you allow into your kind of world, or maybe even things like when or who you're going to ask for help when you're going through a hard time, or the information you might be just digesting through reading the news or social media, kind of like what Annie had said. So outside of the circle is everything that's not in our control. So I want you to think about, when are some times that you find yourself reaching out of that circle, trying to control the things that might not be in your control. Let's take a moment, kind of think about, what does that feel like for you? Anybody willing to share kind of when they feel compelled to reach outside of the circle?
With other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So like when you're trying to control other people?
Or, just, I guess it could be. It's that, that expectation that I will somehow influence them by the roles I take within the church community.
Mm-hmm.
What I say.
Yeah. So maybe putting some pressure on yourself to like have the perfect degree of influence so that you can help them or.
Right.
Yeah.
As if I know what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What other kind of ways does that maybe show up for people kind of reaching outside of their circle? Yeah, I feel like oftentimes we reach outside of the circle when we feel stressed, right? Like maybe we want to control what other people are doing, how they're reacting to us, how they're behaving. I feel like we see that so much right now, even with just wearing masks, wanting people to have maybe the same opinion that you do about being safe, right? And so in those moments when we're trying to control all the things that might not actually be in our control, it can be really stressful. So when you notice that happening, something that can be really helpful is to just sort of bring yourself back to what's actually in your circle and in your control, and maybe being really intentional about just focusing on one of those things for a little while. So as you were doing this activity with the circle of control, maybe you noticed that to some degree, we sort of used all 5 aspects of grasp with grounding, relationships or thinking about relationships, acceptance, that self-compassion, and then perspective taking. So thank you for participating with that. So for this next piece, I'm going to kind of pass it back to Jen. Oh, can't hear you, Jen.
I had my secret mute button on this time. So we wanted to let you know that we actually are planning to do 3 free support groups in January. The 3 of us have actually been developing support groups for doctors, nurses, kind of frontline workers, people who are in care facilities, and we've been executing those for 7 or 8 months now, and they've been really successful and really helpful. So we're kind of trying to move that population to help as many folks as we can while things are stressful and while we're not sure when things are going to kind of go back to what's going to be the new normal. So in January, on every Monday, the 4th, 11th, and 25th, so not Martin Luther King Day, we're going to run a free support group. This is going to be for Colorado residents only, unfortunately. So for those of you out of state, my apologies. That has to do with our licensure and what we're able to do. But all you have to do if you want more information about that is to email me. And I'm going to put my email in the chat so that you have it. It's just jvanel@theColoradoCenter.com, but I'll put that in the chat for you. And essentially that group looks kind of like this. So there is kind of a theme that we follow every week. So every week that you participate, it's going to be a new group. But the structure stays the same. So we talk about a specific theme. We're going to kind of steer the group around that theme based on what you're experiencing. So hopefully we'll be able to get an idea of what you might like to see. And you'd get a practical tool like the brain vacation or like Jackie's activity today that you can use in your work life, in your personal life, something that's helpful, adaptable, and practical. And hopefully just get some support from other people who are experiencing some of the same challenges, the same stresses that you are. So if you think you might be interested in that, it's going to happen in January. Please email me. I'll be happy to answer questions. Happy to get you set up with that. So yeah, that's going to happen in January. It looks like we have a little bit of extra time. So if Elizabeth and Jackie are okay with it, I'd like to ask the group a question. Is that okay with you guys?
Oh yeah.
I'm just curious for whoever is willing to share this, what are some of the main challenges that you're experiencing right now in the current climate? Beth?
So I am a parent of 2 young children who are remote school, and it's kind of gone back and forth. They were hybrid for a while and now they're fully remote. And I have a full-time job working for a presbytery, and it's challenging.
So you're in the, you are an adult and a teacher and a caretaker, and you're wearing more hats than usual.
Yeah.
And the difficulty of going back and forth. Jackie and I both work with a good number of kids in the school systems, and the challenges that we've seen with both the kids and the parents has been really, really, really stressful. So
yeah. I worry about my kids more than I worry about myself. What this is doing to them in the long run, mentally and emotionally. So I think they'll be okay academically because everybody's in the same boat. Well, that's not true at all, because I worry about the equity piece completely. But I don't worry about them academically being able to catch up. But mentally and emotionally, this is taking a toll on them.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Beth.
That's a perfect example, isn't it? Of like, well, what part of that is in your control and what part isn't? And it's just feels frustrating or helpless making or something to try to reach beyond what's in your control. But of course you care.
Yeah. Anybody else willing to share the challenges that they're experiencing? Kate, I think Kate, we had a hand from Kate first.
Parish administrator and junior warden of a small Episcopal church in Ohio. And we have been without a rector or any clergy on site since last January, when our beloved rector retired. We haven't had a part-time interim who was about 100 miles away. So that has been a challenge as I've taken over doing the rector's job in addition to my own, which obviously I'm not trained for. It's working. And we actually did we got a priest in charge assigned to us. That'll happen in February. But for a year, I'm trying to juggle both and not let any of the balls drop. And oh yeah, there's that guy who lives in my house. He kind of expects me to see him on occasion too. It feels like there's too many balls and I've dropped too many of them. And I actually did have one parishioner tell me that when this church closed, it would be my fault because I did not do enough. And so it's been migraine city for the past few months. And I know everybody's dealing with the same kind of thing. It's just we're all overwhelmed and trying to do too many things for too many people.
Seeing lots of head nods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even we're at head nodding. So seems like you have a group with you that is definitely understanding that, Kate. I think I saw I noticed Diane has unmuted, and I've got Annie had a hand up. Let's go to Annie first. So Annie.
Thank you. Sure. One of the saddest things that I'm witnessing is people from all different parts of my life becoming very cold and hardened towards people because they feel threatened, because like they represent one or the other side of an issue or politics, or they're fearful about money, and so it's that, I know there's nothing, you can't change somebody's feeling, but it's that sorrow of seeing people be really cruel. if only in their attitude and the things they say and how shut down they are to other people's situations.
Thank you, Annie. Diane, were you wanting to share something with the group?
Yes, the biggest thing for me is the underlying irritability, I guess, when people come in to ask something. And they're not angry at me, but I can tell that whatever question that they're asking or whatever help they want or need would normally have come in a much different tone than what I get now. And I know it's not me, but I can't fix the things that are underlyingly distressing them at this point. So it's just wearying to be up against that. Well, when are we going to meet? Why can't we do this? You know, well, here, let me show you. Come with me. I'll show you what the sanctuary looks like. You know, here's what our diocese has said. You know, I can say all the correct things, but they're not the right things. So it's just wearying coming up against that general level of irritability now.
Mm.
Yeah.
How many of you are up against problems like that you feel like you can't solve? So you're doing the best you can. Seeing head nods. Yeah. That's been a real kind of theme in terms of challenges this year, it seems like. Anyone else that would like to share?
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan?
I feel like especially around Christmas, you know, we're not doing a traditional like in-church service, so we're trying to make other offerings that are just as great. Mm-hmm. So then the pressure that goes into that of trying to make something, you know, super creative and intricate, when we're all feeling a little bit drained creatively, has been tough.
It's tough. Christmas is Christmas, and it's people talk about Christmas and Easter being like Black Friday for the religious community. I don't know that I like to think of it that way, but that is tough because you know there's a limit to how much connection you can have with people, and I'm sure it's forcing everyone to kind of step outside the norm for sure. Yeah.
I feel like that kind of ties into the whole acceptance piece. There's so much pressure to have the holidays still feel as good as they normally do. And the reality of the situation is it might not. You know, we're not as connected. We're not able to do some of our traditions. And that's such a painful thing that we're having to accept kind of as a community.
Yeah. I'm wondering if any of you have any questions, you know, as we get close to the end time, if any of you have any questions for us.
This was really helpful. It was nice to just kind of take a step back from the responsibilities and not look at an inbox for an hour.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that for all of you, this might be the only time that you get a break today.
I did tell people it was actually 2 hours long, so you'll cover for me, right?
I will. I heard nothing. It's 2 hours. I'm here until, you know, an hour from now. So yeah.
That's a way of taking control of what you can. Lie about your schedule.
And we'll do a group in January on forgiveness, so it's okay. You know, Kate's you know, although we're kind of laughing, you know, Mike, your kind of comment about this kind of being nice to be away from an inbox, and Kate's kind of comment about having this extra time reminds me of something that I tell a lot of the clients that I work with, which is, you know, we think of self-care, you know, taking care of ourselves, which I know is the thing that makes everyone crawl under the table when they hear it because it's so overused. But really, self-care is meant to be preemptive. We do it before we're overwhelmed, before we're taxed. And so often we don't get the chance to do that. It's like we have to be reactionary. We have to do the breathing after we're hyperventilating. Or so just remembering that that self-care can come in 30-second increments. You know, I work with someone now who has a very high stress job. The only time he gets away is when he goes to the restroom. So he goes to the restroom and he listens to like a 3-minute meditation on his headphones in the restroom. It's like, however you have to be creative about getting that time for yourself, you know, that 30 seconds can be so valuable and carry so much weight when everything is so stressful. So, you know, just encouraging you to not be afraid to take even a short time, a 30 seconds or a minute for yourself, you know, to kind of reset. It's so essential. Doesn't have to be a 3-hour meditation where you ding the bell and you're sitting quietly. You know, Elizabeth is really good at that.
But even I don't have time for it all the time.
Yeah. So
some churches I know, and I know one or two in Colorado that have a labyrinth. Go walk your labyrinth if you have the time for that. It's wonderful mindfulness.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
oh, I was just gonna say, do you all have any tips for disconnecting at the end of the day? I find that it's a weird transition to go from staring at my computer all day and then staring at a screen afterwards.
I can offer. So that's something that has come up pretty across the board. I don't know, Elizabeth and Jackie, I'm guessing for you too. Everyone is missing the transition. And this could be kids not getting to transition from class to class at school, going to the bookshelf to get a different book or a box of crayons or whatever it is, to adults not having that transition to and from work. So what I encourage is kind of trying to recreate, you know, if you go through the Starbucks drive-through every morning on your way to work, then get up in the morning, get ready for work the way you normally would, get in the car, go to Starbucks, and you're just coming back home instead of going to where you normally would. But it's kind of helping you create that ritual. And if you can't do something like that, just making some kind of significant change. Okay, I'm putting my computer away at the end of the day so that I can't see it if you have to use it on the dining room table, or you know, just really giving yourself something to kind of separate and transition. It's the transition that a lot of people are struggling with right now.
Another way of kind of doing that is just sort of acknowledging that it's the time to transition. I know for me, like, it used to be commuting from work. It's just a 10-15 minute drive, but during that time, you're kind of thinking about, okay, well, what happened today? And how am I going to set that down? How am I going to pick it back up tomorrow? And when I walk in the door of my house, who am I going to be when I'm with my family? And you're thinking about that in the car, even if it's just inside your head. But when you're at home or in a home office, you don't have that space. And so sometimes, you know, just even taking a piece of paper or a journal and saying, okay, this is what I'm setting down to wrap up my day. This is how I'm going to leave it here at work. And then maybe even taking a moment to set an intention of how you want to show up when you leave that work and kind of reintegrate back with your family. So just taking a second, you know, either writing it down or even just kind of walking yourself through the leaving work and transitioning home piece in your mind.
And I echo both of those ideas. Essentially, you know, we all just we get up from our computers and then out the door of this room, and you're into your life maybe in the next room, and we need, in whatever way you can, create a buffer for yourself. It may not be a whole 15 minutes, but why not? To adjust, to get yourself in or out of your day. I'm going to steal something that I remember Jen has said in the past, which is even creating a ritual of, you know, if you're working inside your house, you know, walk outside the door of your house, wipe your feet on the mat and walk back in. Like actually just a simple ritual of like, I'm coming back into my home, right? Anything that you can make a little ritual to kind of help your mind beyond words remember, okay, now I'm in another state of mind. Now I'm in another role. So hope that's helpful.
So when we end our groups, we like to end with a wish. And I'm going to share that with you now, and that'll be the end of our group. And I don't know if Megan has anything after that. No. So just a reminder, if you are interested in the group in January, please feel free to email me with any questions, or if you want to get set up for that, I'd be happy to do that for you and answer any questions. My email is in the chat already for you. So our wish.
Jen, sorry. I'm
yes.
sorry.
Oh, what did I forget?
No, just Megan is going to be sending out some follow-up information, I think.
Oh, great.
Right. We're big on feedback. So some survey questions, if you're willing to answer them, but also information about sort of the time and the dates for the groups in January that are free. So look for that. Okay, a wish.
Great. So our wish for you this week and really during this time is that you're able to find ways to feel empowered and supported in the ways that you approach stresses in your day-to-day life right now. So we hope that you'll take that wish with you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you three for leading this class. It's been a welcome hour-long break.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
really
it's been a real pleasure.
So many people.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you.